The past few days of my life have been straight out of a soap opera. I never expected to be treated like an object by my husband, who had just married me a few days ago. Let me give you guys some background so you can understand how I ended up in this mess. If I'm being honest, I'd always been a people pleaser, growing up as the eldest daughter in a traditional household. My husband and his family forced me to stay at home an hour before a honeymoon and treated me like a maid, so I did something to get the perfect retribution. My parents were loving but strict, and they had high expectations for me. I was the first person in my family to attend college, land a well-paying job, and get married. They were proud, and I felt the weight of their expectations more than ever. Almost 2 years ago, I met James, a 29-year-old man who was charming, kind, and everything I thought I wanted in a partner. We were introduced by mutual friends at a casual get-together, and we were inseparable from that point on. James' family played a significant role in his life, which I initially admired because I was raised in a small, close-knit family and knew the value of family ties. However, it soon became apparent that James' family operated somewhat differently. They were intrusive in all of his decisions and always involved in each other's affairs. At first, I put this down to their closeness, which was something to be envied rather than criticized. But as our relationship became more serious, I began to notice how James would frequently put his family's needs despite these warning signs. I loved James and persuaded myself that once we were married, everything would change because we would be starting our own family. So I assumed that once we were married, James would naturally prioritize our needs. Before ours, there were innumerable weekends when we had plans, but they were canceled because his parents or siblings needed something. It wasn't just about helping out occasionally. I couldn't have been more mistaken. The wedding itself was a lovely but exhausting event, and his family undoubtedly played a part in everything. From the guest list to the decorations, everything was done with their help. I had thought my wedding day would be a celebration of our love, but instead it felt like a show put on by his family. I should have called off the wedding at that point, but I was too in love and too innocent to see the reality. After the wedding, I was looking forward to our honeymoon, which was supposed to be a time for us to unwind, relax, and enjoy each other's company without any interruptions. We had planned to spend 2 weeks in Bali, which is a dream destination for both of us. I wanted to travel to Europe, but I was frustrated and kept my feelings to myself because I was determined not to let anything ruin our special day. James insisted on recommending a place his family had visited previously, and I reluctantly agreed, assuming it would still be romantic and lovely. I had imagined romantic dinners under the stars and lazy days on the beach exploring temples, but I had no idea that my honeymoon would be anything but. The day after our wedding, we were supposed to depart for the airport in the late afternoon. James had been acting a little strange since the previous evening, but I put it down to post-wedding fatigue. He asked if we could talk after we finished packing. I remember thinking that was a little strange, but I dismissed it and said yes. We then sat down in the living room, and that's when he revealed the shocking information. His family had decided to make our honeymoon a family vacation, and his parents, siblings, and even a few cousins would be joining us. The worst part was that they didn't think I should go. According to James, I was now a part of the family, and as the newest member, it was expected that I stay behind to take care of the household chores while they enjoyed the trip. I looked at James for any indication that he understood how ridiculous and hurtful this was, but he seemed completely unaware. He even smiled a little when he said that this was a great opportunity for me to bond with his family and show them how committed I was to becoming a part of their unit. He'd assured me that we could always plan another trip in the future, but for the time being, this was what his family wanted and expected. Instead of reacting with the anger and hurt I felt bubbling inside, I took a deep breath and forced a smile. I told James that I understood, and that if this was what he and his family wanted, I would respect their wishes. He seemed relieved by my response, thanking me for being so understanding. The honeymoon was about the pattern of disregard and control that had been present throughout our relationship. If I accepted this, I would be setting the precedent for a lifetime of being sidelined and disrespected by both my husband and his family. James was busy packing for his new family vacation, so I excused myself, went into the bedroom, closed the door behind me, and gave myself a moment to process everything. Tears started to well up in my eyes, but I forced myself to hold back because I knew I had to take charge of the situation and make a decision that respected my needs and self-respect. I considered where I could go and what I could do to reclaim this time for myself, and then it struck me that my parents owned a lovely vacation home. Home in Hawaii had first offered it to us for our honeymoon, but James insisted that Bali was more exotic and adventurous. Now, it seemed like the ideal place for me to get away, think, and enjoy some much-needed peace and solitude. Without wasting any time, I booked a last-minute flight to Maui that was scheduled to depart that evening. I hastily packed my bags and decided to leave without telling James and his family. Before I left, I wrote a brief note to James explaining that since he would be enjoying Bali, I left the note on the kitchen counter, grabbed my luggage, and left for the airport without turning around. I felt a range of emotions swirling inside of me, including anger, sadness, betrayal, and a profound sense of liberation for the first time in a long time. I was putting myself first and making a choice that honored my happiness and well-being. I had my chores to do with his family, so I wished him a pleasant trip and told him we could talk when we both returned. In the following weeks, I made every effort to forget that I had recently gotten married and my husband was away from me. I treated myself to spa days, indulged in delectable local cuisine, and even took up surfing lessons, a lifelong dream of mine. The house was warm and inviting, with large windows that offered breathtaking views of the ocean and the soothing sound of waves crashing against the shore and the gentle rustling of palm trees in the breeze. Utilizing this time for introspection, I considered how my relationship with James began and how we ended up in this predicament. I came to the painful but empowering realization that I deserved better than to be treated as an afterthought in my marriage because I had been so eager to fit in with James' world and please his family that I had forgotten my own needs and desires, disregarded warning signs, and compromised on my boundaries, all in the name of love and acceptance. I felt refreshed and at peace with my decision as my time in Hawaii came to an end. I packed my bags and prepared to return home, ready to face the situation head-on and stand up for myself. When I landed back home, I turned on my phone and found nearly 100 messages and missed calls from James and his family, who weren't concerned about my well-being. James respected me, valued my feelings, and was willing to prioritize our relationship. James's mother sent a particularly harsh message calling me ungrateful and accusing me of disrespecting their family traditions. She went on to say that I had missed a crucial opportunity to prove my worth as a daughter-in-law and that I was angry for not performing the job they had given me. James had left several voicemails, his tone growing more and more frustrated with each one. His family members had also contacted me, some of them expressing confusion over my absence, while others outright accused me of being selfish and immature. How disappointed they all were in me. My sister-in-law also sent a text saying that I was a letdown to her family because I was disrespecting them. She made multiple remarks about my family and how we were rude people with bad habits. After reading these messages, I was even more incensed than before. How could they say such things about me when they had interrupted my honeymoon? I could take their insults, but they also made remarks about how I couldn't handle my family. But I also felt a sense of clarity, and their responses only strengthened my conviction that I had made the right choice by standing up for myself. I've told my parents to avoid communication with James and his family for the time being, and I haven't told them about the entire situation yet because I didn't want to bother them. At the moment, I'm staying with a friend while I try to figure out what to do next. James keeps insisting that I apologize and return home, saying that we can resolve things if I just learn to put family first. But after everything that's happened, I'm not sure I want to. So Reddit, AITA for taking a vacation instead of staying home to do chores while my husband went on a family vacation during our honeymoon update. I told James that I needed more time to think and hung up before I said something I might regret. I've been staying with my friend, who has been an absolute rock through all of this. She's been reminding me every day that I deserve to be treated with respect and that I shouldn't have to prove my worth just to get their forgiveness. The audacity of that statement almost caused me to drop my phone. They said they would forgive me if I apologized. Anyone, but especially a family that views me as a servant, has been a constant source of support and has helped me see things more clearly. After my talk with James, I reached out to my parents, who were shocked to learn what had happened. My mom, who had been so excited for the wedding, was devastated that this was how things were going so quickly after my dad was furious. They have offered their full support, even suggesting that I move back home for a while to get my mind straight. The idea is alluring, especially in light of the deluge of messages I've been receiving from James and his family. James has been sending me voicemails and texts, each one more venomous than the last. At first, he attempted to use the guilt card by reminding me of our vows and asking if I truly wanted to end our relationship over a misunderstanding. When that failed, he changed strategies and told me calmly that his family would forgive me and forget everything if I simply returned. It's as if I'm particularly angry with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law because they've escalated their harassment to a new level. They've been harassing my parents and demanding to know where I am. They made such a scene at my parents' house the other day that the neighbors got involved, and my poor mom was struggling to remain calm while dealing with their vile accusations. I've lost sight of the purpose of this whole situation and want to yell at him that I don't need his or their forgiveness. In fact, it should be the other way around. Dared to suggest that my parents were involved in destroying their family's reputation, and by the end of it all, the neighborhood was rife with rumors. I'm now wondering what I've gotten myself into and whether this is what I signed up for when I said I do, because the idea of living the rest of my life being treated in this manner makes me sick to my stomach. I knew I couldn't remain silent any longer, so I called James and told him bluntly that if he even thinks for a moment that I'm apologizing to any of his family members, he is completely wrong for what they did to me and my family, and they should be pleading with me for forgiveness. I was fuming as I spoke, and I could tell he was surprised by my tone. He began to say something that was likely a feeble attempt to defend their actions, but I interrupted him, telling him that he needed to settle this feud more than I did because I didn't know him or his family at all. But the moment he took sides with him, I would lose him. I hung up before he could answer, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and adrenaline. I couldn't stand hearing his ridiculous justifications any longer. It only serves to highlight how little he comprehends or perhaps cares about my viewpoint. How could he expect me to continue living in a situation where my needs and feelings are consistently disregarded? Since that call, I've been giving my next steps some serious thought. The more I think about our relationship, the more I realize how one-sided it has been. I've always been the one to make concessions and go above and beyond to make things work, but this time I'm done sacrificing my happiness for people who don't respect me. I know it will be a difficult journey, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm taking charge of my own life. I'm grateful to Reddit for giving me the confidence I didn't know I had while reading through everything. Your encouraging words and guidance have opened my eyes. I've been so focused on pleasing other people that I've forgotten my value. Your words have made me realize that I deserve better, and I'm beginning to think that this community has given me the courage to advocate for myself. Thank you so much for that update, guys. I decided to move in with my parents for a while for 2 reasons. First, I felt that I had spent enough time at my friend's house, even though she asked me to stay longer because I didn't want to bother her any more than I already had, and I didn't want to overstay my welcome. The second reason was that I didn't want my parents to be alone in case James's family decided to bother them again, which I hope won't happen again, but by now I've learned that you can never predict what they might do. It felt strangely comforting to move back home because it felt like I was regaining a part of myself that I had lost in the chaos of the previous few weeks, and my parents were relieved to have me there. Saw how concerned they had been. It was good to be surrounded by people who truly cared about my welfare and had no hidden agendas. I began to establish a routine of helping out around the house and spending time with my parents, which gave me the space I needed to think. Then, out of the blue, a stranger contacted me through a mutual friend. It turned out that the stranger was James' ex-girlfriend Pam. At first, I was surprised and wondered why she would want to get in touch with me. But when she explained that she wanted to offer her support after hearing about the entire incident, I was intrigued. We texted a few times before deciding to meet for coffee. Pam was like looking into a mirror. Her story was very similar to mine, and as we spoke, I realized how strangely similar our experiences were. She told me that when she and James first started dating, he also believed he was a family man who was very attached to his family. At first, she admired his close relationship with him, just like I had, but then things began to pan related a particularly odd incident in which they had planned a weekend getaway, something she had been looking forward to for weeks, but James' mother abruptly claimed she wasn't feeling well. They took her to the doctor, but there was nothing wrong with her. It was as if she had staged the whole thing to prevent them from traveling together. Whenever they planned to go out, one or another family member would always end up accompanying them. It was never just the two of them, and they had no privacy. Pam also mentioned that whenever she was invited to family dinners, they expected her to help clean the table and wash the dishes afterward. This struck me as strange because, in my experience, when someone is invited over, they are treated as guests rather than as free labor, but in James's family, this was the norm. They didn't see Pam as a guest, but rather as someone who needed to earn her place at the table. This was when Pam began to realize that this wasn't just a close-knit family, but one that was extremely controlling to the point of being manipulative. Table, she told me how humiliating it felt, especially since James never intervened to support or defend her. Instead, he just went along with it as if it were perfectly normal. Pam also disclosed that all of this was too much for her, and she tried to talk to James about it in the hopes that he would understand and set some boundaries with his family. But James refused to listen to her and instead blamed her for not understanding how important family was to him. As I listened to Pam, I felt a great sense of validation because everything she described echoed what I had been going through. It seemed like James had a pattern of attracting women into his life only to suffocate them under the weight of his family's expectations. However, after a while, she realized that nothing was going to change and that James was too preoccupied with his family's dynamics to ever truly prioritize his relationship with her. The more Pam talked, the more I realized that staying would never improve my situation. After our talk, I experienced a range of emotions, including relief, anger, sadness, and most importantly, clarity. I wasn't crazy for feeling this way. I wasn't overreacting. This was a pattern, and it was obvious that James wasn't going to change. I discussed the situation with my parents afterwards, and they were both very supportive, assuring me that I deserved better and that it wasn't worth it to continue in a marriage where I was continuously treated disrespectfully. It was the final push I needed to move forward with the divorce, because I knew without a doubt that I wanted to do so. It was a difficult decision, but it was the right one. And after everything I heard from Pam and the conversations I had with my parents, I knew what I needed to do. My lawyer would be telling James about my decision to move on from this toxic situation and begin rebuilding my life on my terms. File for divorce. The only thing we can hope for right now is that the divorce will be easier than everything that led to it. Update 3. Hello everyone. As I mentioned in the previous update, I've decided to divorce James. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the best one for me. I've already signed the divorce papers, but I haven't heard back from James yet. In the meantime, I'm trying to focus on returning to my normal life, putting all of my energy into my career, and taking steps to improve my mental health. Nevertheless, things didn't go exactly as planned. My friend's birthday was the other day. She's been a huge support system during this entire ordeal and took me in when things first went south. She wanted me to attend her party, but to be honest, I was a little nervous about going. I was afraid of the whispers and judgment because I knew that people knew I got married and then decided to get a divorce within a month. The entire world was watching to see how I would handle the embarrassment, but I knew that if I hid now, I would have to hide forever. I couldn't let the fear of what other people would think control my life, so I decided to go. At first, everything went smoothly. People were much more understanding than I had anticipated, and I was relieved that no one seemed overly interested in my drama. The atmosphere was light, and for the first time in weeks, I was able to unwind and enjoy my friend's company. It felt good to be out and about, to feel like a regular person again, even if only for a short time. But then, just when I thought that maybe everything would be all right, James stormed into the venue. I was shocked to see him because this was the last place I thought I would see him, and the sight of him made me panic. How did he even know where I was? James immediately headed toward me, his face twisted with rage, and he didn't waste any time before launching into a tirade demanding to know how I could do this to him. I tried to keep my composure. Maintaining my composure and putting on my best face, I asked him calmly if he meant that I was not permitted to attend my friend's birthday party going forward. However, my response only seemed to incite him further, and he began lecturing me in front of everyone about how I was destroying our sacred bond. Given how little he had done to defend our marriage when it mattered, I might have laughed at that comment. What was sacred about a husband who stood by in silence while his wife was treated disrespectfully and denigrated by his family? I told him I didn't want to have any kind of conversation with him, especially not here at my friend's house during her birthday party. I tried to leave in the hopes of diffusing the situation, but James wouldn't have it. He followed me, his voice growing louder and his words more erratic, and just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, one of the partygoers intervened. Calmly but firmly, he told James to back off and leave me alone. At that point, James lost it. He didn't take the man's intervention well and started yelling that I was cheating on it was like watching a switch flip in James's head. He went from being hurt and angry to completely irrational. I was shocked. He accused me of rushing into the divorce because I was having an affair. The accusation was so ridiculous that for a moment, I wasn't even sure how to respond. However, Jam wasn't finished. He lunged at the guy who had defended me, shouting in his face and demanding to know if we were having an affair. James knew that I didn't even know this guy well. He was just a friend of a friend, someone I had hardly spoken to before that night. The party came to a screeching halt as people rushed to pull James away before things could get physical. My friend was crying and apologizing for something that wasn't her fault, and the guy who stepped in to help me was trying to calm James down, even as James threw baseless accusations at him. It didn't seem to matter to James because he was out of control, lashing out at anyone and anything in his path. His behavior was erratic, unhinged even, and it scared me. This was the man I had married, the man I had once thought I would spend the rest of my life with, and now he was a stranger, someone I couldn't recognize or reason with, and the realization that this was who he truly was underneath all the charm and the facade was heartbreaking. His face twisted in a mixture of anger and desperation, shouting that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. As soon as he was gone, the weight of what had just happened hit me like a ton of bricks. I was shaken, embarrassed, and more than a little afraid. I couldn't stop apologizing to my friend and the guy who had saved me after the entire scene at the party. They both reassured me over and over again that I had nothing to apologize for and that none of this was my fault, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that everything would have been fine if I hadn't been there. My friend's birthday would have gone smoothly without the drama James caused, and she gave me a tight hug and promised that we would laugh about that day later when things had calmed down. In the days that followed, I tried to process everything and talk to my parents and lawyer, who both agreed that this most recent incident only confirmed that I was right to end the marriage. It was evident that James was not only unwilling to accept the divorce, but was also losing control in a way that made me fear for my safety. So I knew what I needed to do next. I chose to speak with James's mother directly because I was done with I called her and didn't waste any time getting to the point. I reminded her of all the times I had tried to keep the peace for the sake of the marriage and excused her and James' erratic behavior. I also made it clear that I had had enough of it. I told her that if James or any of their family members continued to harass me, I would file for a restraining order. I could almost hear her getting angry over the phone, but I didn't back down. I told her that it was in everyone's best interest for James to sign the divorce papers and let this go, unlike them, because I had plenty of evidence to take them to court if they pushed me any further, and after everything I've been through. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when she said that James would lose it in a heartbeat if word got out that his wife had to file a restraining order against him, that got her real quiet real fast. She tried to suggest that we could all sit down and work things out, but I cut her off because there was nothing left to work out. This marriage was over, and the sooner they accepted that, the better off everyone would be. I hung up feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. It was a relief to finally stand up to them and make it clear that I wasn't going to be pushed around any longer. James signed the divorce papers shortly after that phone call, almost as if the threat of for the first time in what seems like forever. Things have calmed down. I want to thank everyone here for their support as well. When I first posted my story, I was scared and unsure, but the advice, encouragement, and kind words from this community gave me the strength to stand up for myself. Losing everything he and his family held dear finally forced him to face reality. My lawyer is now handling all the paperwork, and I've started the process of officially closing this chapter of my life. Holds, and I'm certain that I can handle whatever comes next with the help I've gotten.